Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle. The Friday after the most consequential election in presidential history, correct?
No.
Oh, come on. It's
I
still a
mean, it
good
is
morning.
Friday.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's a good morning too.
yeah,
It's snowing almost a foot here in Colorado right now, on top of like 8 inches we got a couple days ago. So this reminds me of Colorado. How do I
yeah.
look?
You look great. You look like you all actually everybody there from Colorado. They all look like Colorado.
Yeah, we look like Coloradoans.
Yeah.
We're all gung ho to be out in the snow because I'm going to go out in the snow in a
But when
little bit.
I lived there, I dressed that way too.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, Professor, so it is a good morning. It is Friday. It's we've talked all last week about comparison of this election compared to past consequential elections. So we're not going to go into that again because people can listen to last week's podcast if they want. But you wrote a pretty extensive treatise. Treatise is too much. Notes from
Yeah.
Professor Tootle about what we should expect from the Trump White House. Do you mind just summarizing or encapsulating? It doesn't have to be the same thing, but just kind of give our friends who have signed on and people in the future what we should expect from the Trump administration, and it can be different now.
Yeah. I mean, I basically just said we should expect people to act like themselves. That one of the old, pillars of conservatism is the idea that character is destiny. That um, that we shouldn't be shocked when people act like themselves. And so I just sort of went through and I said, well, uh, this is how Trump acted last time, and we shouldn't be shocked if he does these things. And then I said the Democrats are we should this is what they are doing, and we shouldn't be shocked if they keep doing that. And then I said a few things about education and the media, and a couple people commented that they wanted to know why I didn't say anything about Republicans. And I guess, to address that criticism, first of all, I did mention Trump and his supporters. I didn't use the word Republican. Uh, but, and second, Republicans aren't sitting around asking each other what went wrong right now. Like, so they are happy with the election results, and they are not engaged in navel gazing introspection and asking what went wrong with America right now. So I didn't feel like addressing them.
So, Professor, I thought it was an excellent Substack mini treatise. I thought it's worth reading, and I think Jake already posted it. Folks, if you haven't read that, please read it. Um, my critique is slightly different than the critique of Republicans, but let's talk about that in a second. My critique
yeah,
was a lot over process, or people are what they are, or institutions
yeah.
are what they are. So like, we'll wring our hands constantly on some crazy thing that Trump said. Well, shocking, he's been saying crazy things for 8 years. So I mean, it's a pretty sound prediction. So you're trying to tell people to stop being surprised. People are what they are, and I think that's really insightful. So thank you, bravo. um let's see, what was my main critique, because I was going to talk about Republicans. um
It could be on the second part, which is what are we supposed to do about it?
Well, yeah, I think we're going to talk a lot of the show about that.
Okay.
Well, let's hammer Republicans for a second. I think that Republicans are going to be in for a big awakening. I mean, a real shock. I know they're happy now, but really, how is Trump going to solve Ukraine and Israel, Gaza? How is he going to solve deficit and debt? How is he going to? They wanted abortion to be prohibited. How is he going to solve that when 7 states just passed constitutional amendments making it more legal than the Supreme Court? I mean, there's going to be he's whatever his
Well,
decision
I
he
mean,
makes.
if you want to, we could start going down each of those things.
Yeah, let's do that in
What
a
was
little
what
bit.
was the
But
first one you said?
overall, do you think Republicans are going to be happy with Trump in 3 years from now?
Oh, wow. That's a different question. Do I think that
Republicans.
you mean elected Republicans or
No, rank and
Republican
file
voters?
Republicans, the ones that are on this show today.
So if you're asking me if I think Republicans, if you're asking me if I think that Donald Trump will have a high approval rating among all Americans 4 years from now, my prediction would probably be no. But if you're asking me if I think that Donald Trump will have a high approval rating among self-identified Republicans 4 years from now, I think the answer will be yes.
And I'm not so certain about that because I don't know if there is a cohesive Trump philosophy that has anything to do with historic, at least, Republicans. I know they all rallied around him and they
But
won.
that's my point, is that the way that this has happened is that people just stop identifying as Republicans. So that's why I was specific in my answer, that the
Mm.
people who are still identifying themselves as Republicans 4 years from now will probably be the people who, approve
Ah,
of Donald Trump
will
in
this shock
4
you to
years from now.
say then, on that point, will this shock you when I say right now, and please don't hold me to this, friends, but my inclination now, after this election, is I can never become a Republican again. I know you're still a Republican, but I don't think I ethically can ever be a Republican again. Does that shock you, or is that again people are going to do what they are, and I am what I am? I'm just behaving like everybody else.
I mean, I would just tell you, life is long.
I know. Well, it may not be for me.
We could have a Dwight Eisenhower waiting in the wings.
Right.
If Mitch Daniels runs for president, or and the opponent is, if our next election is Mitch Daniels versus Gavin Newsom, I might want to revisit that
Well, I think I'm going to vote.
prediction.
I'm going to
Uh,
vote for Republicans, but I just don't see any need for me. Here's my premise on political parties, and tell me how I'm wrong. If you believe in the principles of the party that they ascribe to, that they put in writing, and then they actually try to execute what they put in writing, and you like the leaders, and because they're trying to execute the principles, and you like the camaraderie, the teammates, they're all like the principles, and you're working towards that common goal. If you like the principles, the leaders, and the teammates, you should be in a political club. Well, I don't want to be in that political club.
yeah. Well, it just depends on, you know, uh, and this is the other reason why I didn't write about Republicans specifically, like how the party will respond. Here are some other things that I just don't know. First of all, Donald Trump is now a lame duck president. Um,
Maybe.
and we know that, no, he is. I mean, come on.
Well, you and I think so, but there are people out there talking in the Trumposphere that,
Whether he's going to become like dictator for life or something.
well, no, it has to be consecutive. The Constitution says it has to be consecutive, and then,
No, he's a lame duck president,
well, you and
and
I,
he's really old. He is also starting to slip a little bit mentally, and um, uh, and even if you don't believe any of that, he is human. He will be dead one day, right?
right.
That's the one thing all human beings have in common. And we've seen uh, people who try to imitate him are less successful,
That's true.
and people who are less like him run ahead of him. So
Not in this
I
election.
don't.
No, that's not true. Not in this election.
I think.
I'm pretty sure I saw a blog that said in almost every instance he ran ahead of congressional and Senate candidates this year. Historically, you're right. This year, I think he was the
Yeah,
lead.
maybe. Yeah, but I'm saying once his name is not on the ballot, I think there'd be a reversion to the mean in that regard. Like he's not gonna be, his name is not gonna be on the ballot ever again. So I I'm less confident about how the Republicans who still wish that he was a more conventional human being um, uh, will respond in government. You know, because the margin in the House is so slight that uh, Republicans have to find some way of governing. So I think, I mean, I guess again, we're all predict this. These are the predictions I'm less
I'm sure.
confident about. But what's probably going to happen is that the Republican leadership is going to have to depend on Trump himself to keep the wacky members of Congress in line. And if that happens, it ends up strengthening in a strange way the less crazy members of the House caucus, because he's the only person they listen to.
Right.
You um, and
Well,
then
let's
in
take an issue.
I'm sorry.
Let's take an issue that will help articulate what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
trying to
okay,
articulate. Your column, you wrote that people are what they are and don't expect them to be different. Ah,
yeah,
that's a wise, astute comment. So, don't expect him to be different. He says he's going to solve, and I don't mean that's rhetorical flourish that he's famous for, but he's going to solve the Ukraine Russia thing in the first day.
yeah.
Okay, how's he going to do that and stand for Republican principles?
He's not, and he's not going to do any of those things. So he says a lot of things, and he
Well,
doesn't do
what do you
them.
mean he's not? Everybody heard that. They truly might. A lot of people want us out of that war, and I get
No,
it.
but he also said he was going to build a wall, right? And he never built a wall. It, he doesn't. He can't. He's not a dictator. But here's what I could imagine happening. Um, and again, this is pure crystal ball here, but um, Biden is rushing a big Ukraine funding package right now,
Right.
um, to try to tide them over. Um, through flattery, the current House Republican leadership might say, okay, here's our intelligence assessment. You know, whether he believes it or not, who knows? But it's entirely possible that they could make an argument to him that says something along the lines of, we need some time to let your brilliance and negotiating skills um, uh, solve this problem, Your Eminence. And in the meantime, um, in order to project unity for other parts of your agenda, let's package a Ukraine funding bill that the Senate wants, that the Republicans and some Democrats probably want out of the Senate, and buy ourselves another year so that your genius can solve all the problems in the world.
To work on
And
him reporting everybody in America that's illegal.
well, yeah, but that's not going to happen.
Okay, let's go to that in a second. So
Yeah,
you,
sorry, but I mean, I'm just
yeah, yeah, but you think that our institutions are what they are, the military industrial complex, and I mean that in a positive way rather than a negative way. But I know, but the institutions, including the congressional institutions of the former Republican Party, are so strong that they'll be able to appeal to Trump in a way that at least it will continue for the foreseeable future in Ukraine. We'll still
no, I,
stand
I I
with
don't depend on and I'll the political scientist Joshua Dunn just had a nice one-line response to Trump's election victory. He said, "James Madison for the win." Um,
explain.
it- it- we don't need to rely on people being good in order for our institutions to work, because our founding fathers actually anticipated bad human beings with bad motives,
Hmm.
um, having incentives to continue to compete with one another. And so uh, I, the more I thought about what Professor Dunn said, um, the more I thought, this doesn't depend on Democrats being good or Republicans being good. It relies on people acting out of their own self-interests, combined with hopefully the incentivizing of uh, hopefully honor and caring about something, and taking into account the fact that everybody is going to be less scared of Donald Trump 18 months from now,
Go ahead and explain that further too.
because he's going to come in right with a bare House majority, probably, and a non-veto proof or a non-filibuster majority in the Senate.
The
A
Republicans
court,
won't do reconciliation on major issues, and the filibuster's effectively moot.
they might, but if they move beyond expanding the regulatory state, this Supreme Court has struck all of that down. I mean,
Mhm.
this is one of the things that is most important. Like, um, the making sure that our judiciary is stacked with, and this is also a crazy stat. I bet Jake heard this too, because I know he listens to advisory opinions. But the most Trumpy jurists and circuit courts are the most overturned by the Supreme Court. Trump, when in office, was the most overturned chief executive by the Supreme Court. And the judiciary of the United States, um, through is more committed to constitutional principles than perhaps any other time in American history. And
Which I think is I think the Supreme Court is a plus, not a minus. I think that's
yeah, and they've proven time and again, and all of their decisions from the last term and the term before that were striking down the regulatory excesses of the executive branch.
yeah.
And that's what I mean when I said, I mentioned in my post about like, we all need to stop advocating for breaking the Constitution when it's something we like. you
Yeah.
know,
That was
let's get past this.
yeah,
Uh, and say, yeah, I want DACA to pass as a law.
it's a law.
But when
I
it
want
doesn't pass, I'm not just going to say, "Hey, President, do it anyway."
I
Right?
want
And
for
then,
border security or a wall as a
right.
law.
And
Yeah.
something else that Joshua Dunn said, I feel like I'm quoting him a lot, and Jake can probably find this, but he said something along the lines of, "I wonder if everyone's going to want, um, if if everyone's going to want the President Trump to be able to forgive, trillions of dollars of debt for his." Here it is. He just put it in the chat. I'll read it out loud. "It would be interesting to know how many people who supported student loan forgiveness still think that presidents should be able to waive $500 billion of debt for one of their favored constituencies." You know, President Biden has been trying
Yeah.
to just forgive debt for his favored constituency.
On his own. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Without a
like,
law.
do you really want the president to have that power? Because now the president is Trump.
Right.
Like, do you think that he should, picture all of the evil corporations and whoever it is you're afraid of in life? Do you think it's okay for our national king or national daddy to have the ability to just give those people a $500 billion?
All
Like,
my liberal friends were madder than hell at the filibuster, and we have to eliminate the filibuster. It has to be gone
yes,
because it's
right.
not undemocratic.
Exactly. Like, I mean, that was one of the, I mean, to get back to the election, like, one of the things is like people didn't recognize, and this is part of the point I was trying to make, is that Democrats don't realize their own radicalism. And it was like they never saw it because it was for stuff that they like. And then you don't realize, like, you're advocating getting rid of the judicial filibuster. Well, how do you feel about that now?
Right.
Like, do you really want President Trump to be able to appoint whoever he wants to whatever court with the support of, like,
51.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, 50 plus one?
Yeah. 50 plus the vice president. Yeah.
You don't want minorities to have any say in any of this? Like, there's an important reason why, again, James Madison for the win, why our system is so dependent upon getting people who disagree with you to change their minds. And if they don't change their minds, the default under our Constitution is that nothing happens. And that's not our system failing, that's our system working.
Succeeding. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So I should have no fear about abandoning our NATO allies Well, I mean, I
You
should have a
should.
riddle.
No, you should absolutely be
Yeah.
afraid. Donald Trump is nuts. Like he does crazy things. Who knows? Like again, like yeah, you should be absolutely worried that these things are that he will try. You know, who knows if he'll succeed? But
Okay.
who know?
But it's not the
Don't
Earth.
try to predict
Right, right, right. But
what's
the
going to
sky's
spin
not
out of his
falling in.
brain.
The
Yeah.
sky's not falling in. Just because he says he's going to do it on day one, he can't do it on day one. It will take longer, even if he wants to do it.
Well, there's a reason why I always rank him. I used to rank him as our fourth worst president, and then after January 6th, I bumped him down to our third worst president. But there's a reason why I think he will remain
How out of loop
third
in
worst.
academia can you be to just take that massive landslide victory that he did and say he's the third worst president in our U.S. history?
I'm
How
saying his last term.
I know, but yeah, but you're in a bubble. You're in an academia liberal bubble to be able to say all that. He just got elected. We love Trump.
I mean, so what? I don't like. Yeah, I don't. That doesn't mean anything to me. Like,
Okay,
I mean,
fair enough.
I look at it, but let me. This is going to sound like a strange defense of Donald Trump, but his incompetence saves him from being the worst. Because one of the things that happened a lot was that so many people around him, because they were promoted out of, and by the way, there's a different version of this that takes place in the Democratic Party, and I'll criticize that too. But incompetent people get promoted because of who they are. And it means that Donald Trump was often unable to perform the necessary steps to execute his own policies. And I mean from a very basic level. I had friends who worked in different executive departments. I don't want to be too specific, but and they would say, essentially, what our instructions are incoherent, and we've been given no legitimate instructions. So we have to essentially function without any executive branch leadership because they simply cannot do the basics of governing. The person who's in charge, might as well be writing in crayon on a blackboard.
But you're being all
And
historian honest. That was 4 years ago.
yeah,
This year they have the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, and they have this whole list of pre-approved people that are loyal to Trump, and they're going to be a couple thousand of them are already pre-approved, and they'll be in every damn agency. And he's going to fire everybody. Remember, that's something else. He's going to change the whole bureaucracy in DC
yeah,
and fire military officers.
you simply can't do that, right? Like,
Why not?
if because Donald Trump and 5,000, I mean, if you took every member of the Heritage Foundation and just imported and the Claremont Institute imported them into executive agencies and said fire everybody and hire everybody, it would be 20 years. You you simply can't do it. I mean, my sister has a trucking company. It takes a while to hire people. It takes a while to recruit people. Like,
Train them and
yeah, train them. You get them in. This happens a lot in Washington, D.C. This is what people become frustrated with the so-called deep state. But there are permanent bureaucrats who have been working there for 20 years, and when you're going to be hiring people, you're like, and every one of these things has like GSA level or GS level, whatever. Like, you have to hire someone who has those basic requirements for office.
yeah, but can't you? I mean, the Supreme Court has said as long as it's within the presidential authority, he's acting within his official duties, he can do whatever he wants with him without immunity. So why can't he just executive order change all those regulations
He
and
can certainly
hire a person
executive order all he wants, but those are all going to be met with legal challenges that are going to take I mean, there's a reason why. Think about this. Like, he was charged with crimes, and he was never prosecuted in the 4 years when Joe Biden was in office. You
Mhm.
could, with all of the efforts of all the people who wanted Donald Trump prosecuted for crimes, they could not get a timely indictment of him in 4 years. So you think that Donald Trump will be able to undo, fire everybody in the executive branch? I mean, Jake, do a quick search. How many people currently work in the
2
executive
million.
branch of
2
the
million is my
United
guess. What's your
States?
guess? What's your
Yeah,
guess? Mine is 2 million.
I, I wouldn't even have. I'm not. I'm smart enough to know that I should always wait. 4 million people.
Oh, but that includes military, Jake.
Does yeah? I don't know, but
That
That's
let
includes
that's
military.
cool. That's what the White House website says. 4
Yeah,
million people.
yeah, but
yeah,
that's with military. So
Okay, I'll look for non-military, John.
yeah. But yeah, but I mean, even if the number was 500,000, he couldn't do it.
okay,
He
those are
couldn't do it
really
in 4
interesting.
years.
Let me switch to the next one.
A
Israel, Gaza.
competent person couldn't do it in 4 years.
I
Let
got
alone
you. That's those are
2 million
interesting.
civilians. Yeah,
Israel, Gaza. He says he doesn't believe in war. People are dying. He's got to stop this. It's a nice noble sentiment actually. Um, it is. I don't like death, and especially civilian deaths. So it's nice. It's a nice sentiment, and he alone can solve it. So how's he going to solve this?
he's
Israel,
not.
Gaza.
And Israel's a sovereign nation. And here's the other thing. So is Ukraine, by the way. Americans need to get out of the idea that somehow we are in charge again, like that we can every sparrow that falls from the sky is somehow like the fault of the United States. Like
Right.
Israelis have a say in this, and so does
Okay. Hold
Hamas,
on. Going back to
and
Ukraine.
yeah, so does Ukraine, and so does Russia. Like
I
we,
heard the former Secretary General, I think was his title, of NATO, um, who said that if Americans do what Trump has said, effectively NATO's dead. Because yes, it's a coalition of whatever 30 countries or whatever, but if the United States unilaterally withdraws funding, then NATO's word isn't any good, and it will by de facto crumble. Now that's not me saying that. That's somebody who was in the job that he's really worried about NATO's credibility based off one actor. You're saying we're not that powerful. No, he's saying the U.S. is that powerful and our money is that significant that if we withdraw, the rest of everybody will just the funding from NATO will just disappear. Concur or concur or
well,
disagree?
yes, in its current form. But here's the other thing that we know: like, if America withdrew and there was still a need for NATO, what would happen is that new leaders we would be abdicating our role as world leader,
Yeah.
and that new countries would become world leaders.
Some
Uh,
Germany or France or
yeah,
England
it
or
would be probably Britain and Germany and uh, who knows? I don't. Yeah, just the South.
okay.
Who knows what would rise in the wake? But
I think this
I
is a
don't.
useful conversation because do you have any friends that are just preaching doom and gloom? Do you have any liberal friends that are just
Yes.
really
Oh,
scared?
yes. I have, and I I have friends who won't even engage in conversations with me because I'm not um you
Yeah.
know as sad as they are,
Right.
or what, um and by the way, I say this as somebody who has never supported Donald Trump for 1 millisecond. I have never for one moment of my life have I ever supported any part of Donald Trump or his agenda. But because I'm not uh as despondent, they can't even be in my presence.
Right.
you know
So let's talk about that. How come? Uh, Riddle me this, Batman. Seriously, riddle me this. If you're a pro-life, as in my time when I was running for office, among activists, about 60 to 70% of activists were pro-life. Among rank and file Republicans, no, about 60% were pro-choice in Colorado. I don't know, I can't remember the numbers nationally, but in my time, most Republicans were actually pro-choice, but no doubt most activists and elected officials were pro-life, and it kept changing over time. Over my 40 years of being active, it's become more and more pro-life among activists. I think you have to be a pro-life state legislator in Colorado for now, or you ain't going to get elected as a Republican. For example, so you finally get a president who gets three presidential appointments, and they are adamant. I was we've done several shows on this, so we don't have to go back to it. But I was pretty surprised that they just completely overturned it. I didn't think they'd go that far. They just completely overturned Roe, and the result, just 3 years later, is Colorado puts in a constitutional right of privacy regarding abortion, where there's no limits, zero limit, no limits on it, and it eliminates parental notification that was voter approved, and we now have taxpayer funding for abortions with no limits. And that passed by 60%, Professor. You owe me a steak dinner. Remember when you said, I'll bet you a steak dinner it can't get 60%?
No, I don't remember, but
I don't
I'd love to take you out to dinner. I don't get
Yeah,
it's not,
I don't remember either.
yeah,
Just
I
trying to
don't,
prove a point.
but I'll take your word for it. But I'd buy you dinner anytime,
Yeah, and I
so
thought it was gonna
I
be
like
and I
steak.
thought it would go down by 5% to 60 because of the parental notification and taxpayer funding. I mean, I thought it would have passed by 65 in Colorado, except for those 2 restrictions, and it still passed by 60. So you actually got the exact opposite. If you're a pro-life citizen in Colorado, you got the exact opposite of what you're wanting. You're not saving babies. Yeah, you know, and so aren't they confused? Aren't they mad? Aren't they frustrated? I mean,
You know
talk to
what,
it.
though? Here's
What?
my James Madison for the win. Jake, get ready to pull up that Roy Teixeira, because I'm going to ask you a question, because I think it listed, or maybe it was an AI website, but it listed all of the abortion bills that passed in various states. And maybe the thing that is happening is that our system is working, because citizens, if they're able to have something that that conforms to their own belief system, it takes some of the passion out, because it says, well, in my state, the way I want to do this, it's being enshrined or protected. And,
Florida.
pardon?
Florida, 6
Yeah,
weeks.
but not just in Florida. But here's the other thing that's happening. I don't know if you're really look at the sort of, a lot of the states that are sort of pro-life went with a viability standard,
Mhm.
which is under some standards like a pro-choice position,
Right,
because it still allows
right.
for abortions to take place during the first. Almost everybody went with, what is it, 21 weeks or something?
Yeah, it's varied between 12 and 21, but yes.
Yeah, but I think almost everybody went with 21 weeks, which is the position of the vast majority of Americans. And so, again, is this an answer, right? Maybe if politicians pass laws approved by 80% of Americans, with the position that 80% of Americans have on abortion, that we can't say our system's failing.
Yeah, I love that answer, but Professor, I'm not pro-life, by that
But
definition.
maybe you are, John. Like, this is my point. By giving ourselves these labels,
Right,
it was essentially cutting off all debate,
right,
because nobody ever had to say what they were actually for or against.
and have to think through the difficulties of
Right.
these. Yeah,
Exactly. But once Roe was repealed, it meant that people had to actually engage in governing, which meant that they started with some radical position that they had never had to defend before. And then all of a sudden, they had to deal with reality and voters and what voters actually wanted. It got the decision closer to human beings. And what happened was, I mean, the labels come later. You
mhm.
know, like and that's another thing that was buried in that essay I wrote. But like, social scientists slapping labels on human beings is one of the things that creates the perception of division, where you might not have division. If you would just stop using these labels, you might realize that maybe we agree on this stuff.
So, tying back to a bunch of our conversations, it's the reason that I have been opposed to Roe v. Wade from my earliest memories, from 18 on in politics. So I liked Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade as a conservative because of the experiment of states. What you're describing is that there's a huge, Missouri was an unusual one because it's a very pro-life label state, and the citizens implemented a pro-choice law overturning the elected officials. I think all of that is wonderful that we get these. Now, admittedly there's atrocities and there's problems and there's some real human sorrow stories all
Right.
across the board. But the bottom line is, people, you're saying they have 50 chances of getting it right or wrong. And they can change 2 years from now again. If they got it wrong, they can change. They work with their
Yeah.
legislators. They have a new ballot initiative. And it's this constant ongoing citizen engagement rather than deferring to 7 men who voted for Roe v. Wade and 2 men that voted against it. And then we think our liberty is safe because of a court decision in 1973. Well, that's
Yeah,
just
and no, right, which is another point I tried to make. Like, there are certain things that people just think like, oh, I don't have to think about this anymore because the government's going to do it.
because we're
You
saying,
know, like I'm going to outsource my love. I'm going to outsource
yeah,
my
that was a good
neighborliness.
point.
I'm going to outsource this stuff, and I don't have to do it anymore because the government's going to take care of it. You know, but
That was a really good article.
public policy is for averages. Courts are for edge cases, and you know, the really hard stuff is left for families. You
Yeah.
know, is left for families and neighbors and friends and colleagues and the people who you actually know in your life.
So you're
But
advocating classic conservative philosophy. So bravo, thank you.
I'm a conservative. Like that's the,
Right.
you know, I haven't changed. In fact, you know, it's always funny. You know, you always tease me about this. I still agree with myself. You know,
Yeah.
I
Which is fine, though.
I saw something I wrote about the election 6 years ago, and I thought, oh, I should repost this for John and
Just
say
for
I
an
still agree
audience of
with me.
one.
You know, like yeah, what do you know? And there was something I cut out of that article because I thought it was a funny story, but it was already too long. But I had this incident. Indulge me for a second because I think this story is hilarious, and um, I'm so predictable. You know, it's like everybody knows. And I also have a bad memory. So you take the fact that my character is incredibly predictable, but I forget
Yeah,
everything.
that's
And
funny.
so I got an email from HR that said something about some training I had to do.
And Jake already put up your post from 6 years ago. That's funny. How do you do
Yeah,
that?
that's funny. Yeah, he's on it today. I mean, he's always on it.
Right.
But so I got an email, and I wrote back to the HR director, and I said, is this a scam? You know, or is this legit? And he wrote back, you know, um, every year I send out a note that you need to do this training, and every year you write back to me with exactly the same words. Like, and I was like, and he started forwarding me all of my emails from the
Oh,
past
that is
15 years.
hilarious.
And it's like, yeah, what do you know? I don't think it's important, so I forget it immediately. But my first reaction is always the same. Like that, just know that's who you're dealing with when you're dealing with me. Like, apparently, when you present me with the same set of facts, I will always do the same thing.
That's a
Uh,
nice self-compliment. I like that. Professor, I've got
I
two
don't
quick.
know if it's a compliment. I think it's
Oh,
something
it's a
that
compliment. That's
my
cool.
friends all have to learn to deal with because I will forget your. I'm going to forget your birthday. I'm going to forget your wife's name. I'm going to forget. I'm going to seem incredibly thoughtless uh, and self-absorbed. It's not a compliment. Um,
It's endearing. How's that? Will you
I
accept that?
hope it's the people who I call friends
Yeah.
learn to overcome it.
Okay. Two quick things, and then
And eventually maybe find it endearing, then just say that's
yeah,
just how
fair
it
enough.
is, you
Two
know.
quick things, and we got to open it up to whoever joined us today. Ready?
Yeah.
How the hell is Trump and the Republicans, I should say President-elect Trump and the Republicans, going to do anything rational regarding our deficit and debt without irritating huge swaths of America, including people in their own constituencies, not just like cutting liberal programs. I mean, how are they going to do this without just upset? They're not. As my premise is, they're not. The deficit and debt are going to get worse over the next 4 years. But tell me,
Yeah.
what you think.
Well, this is another one, Jake, get ready. There's what's that committee on debt that it's the bipartisan committee on debt.
Oh, that Simpson Bowles.
Yeah, Simpson's on it still. I can't
It's
remember
the
who,
Simpson
yeah.
Bowles Commission.
But
The
they have that nonprofit, and they did the analysis of the Harris and Trump plans. And Harris actually, the Trump plan is, if enacted,
right,
was actually would lead to more debt
right.
than Harris's
It's going to
proposals.
happen, though, right? I mean,
Right?
Trump doesn't want to do deficit reduction
No,
or
he's never he holds no conservative fiscal beliefs as far as, and I mean, I remember what was was it Larry Kudlow, who was he was a Trump supporter, and I
yeah,
remember early on when people were still trying to kind of get through to Trump, and I heard somebody at AEI told, I don't think I'm telling a story out of turn, but like told me that Kudlow was trying to explain to Donald Trump what a trade deficit was, and he was like, he just can't get it. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't, I don't know. And he's like, I've tried to explain it to him, but he doesn't, he doesn't have any, he has impulses, not, well thought out positions. So he's
So
not gonna.
deficit and debt are going to rise. I mean, you're just undoubtedly, undoubtedly. I mean, it's just going to happen.
Until there's some sort of a financial crisis that hurts human beings, no one's going to solve the debt crisis. It might, I guess it might, the sort of Trump's incompetence is sometimes an asset, because here's a best case scenario for for debt and deficit. I'll give you a best case scenario. Because it's sort of like, I don't know, when all right, here's my thought. How I just explained that I have these horrible character traits and other people compensate for them,
Sure.
uh, President Trump is so incompetent and cares so much about weird things that what might end up happening is you would get some sort of people within the Republican Party who say we need to, get a handle on spending. Democrats who hate Donald Trump might discover that they care about, having some sort of fiscal responsibility. I mean, hope springs eternal. And you get some sort of Senate compromise package that doesn't allow President Trump to pass all of his spending proposals, and someone convinces him that he could be seen as a great man if he gets things done, as lean into his ego for being a master negotiator, and then maybe some sort of compromise but it's not going to be the fiscal cliff.
I think we've passed it.
He's not going to get $14 trillion or whatever it is. I'm sorry, Jake. Can you look that up? What was the total?
It's not like that. You're 10 years
I
ago.
don't know. I'm sorry. That's why. What was the total, Jake, of Trump's?
Oh, just Trump's, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, just Trump's. 15. Was it 15 trillion?
Wow.
Yeah. So I said 14. Yeah. So we're not going to get $14 trillion worth of new federal spending. That's not going to happen.
Right. Well, let me give you an oddball one, and this is my last. Since you brought up an oddball one that you think it's conceivable, let me bring you one that's important to me that I think is conceivable, only because Trump and it looks like a Republican House and Senate. So a unified government. I think there's a chance that there could be a statute regarding DACA or Dreamers under a Republican administration. And the only reason I think there's that chance is because the justice is so clear on it about not deporting a kid who's been here 20 years, who doesn't speak Spanish, and has a little brothers and sisters who's are American citizens, who's now an adult and married a U.S. citizen, and now has U.S. citizen children, and we're going to deport him or her. I don't get it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that as long as there's a rock solid wall or some version of it, and we cut immigration to the bone, I think there's a chance, for the same reasons, that he could be an American hero by granting some path of legal, not even a pathway to citizenship, which is what I support, but a legal documentation for those dreamers. Do you think I'm insane? Or do you think what's going to happen on immigration is my point? I'm trying to advocate my position. What's going to happen?
I would just say it's either nothing or that.
That's not helpful.
Because again, Donald Trump cannot run for office again. So one of the most frustrating things about DACA was that.
Yes, I know it's unconstitutional, and Obama shouldn't.
No, it's not unconstitutional. I didn't say it's only unconstitutional if the president tries to do it by simply declaring things.
Well, that's what
It's
Obama
not
did.
unconstitutional for Congress to pass a law.
Right. But that's what Obama did.
Right. That's kind of my point.
Okay.
But so I'm saying that it would be, he might do some crazy executive orders or something like that, but it's entirely, Republicans passed a clean DACA bill many times. But what always kept it from becoming law was that Democrats wanted to run on it. So Democrats killed laws that would have allowed for, people to have a pathway to citizenship. So there's no, core Republican opposition to the DACA bill that they passed unanimously in, what year was that?
I don't even remember that. So thanks for bringing that up.
I mean, this would have been 20. It was going back and forth in like 2013, 14, and 15. And there was a Republican version of that bill that they passed unanimously.
Interesting. I didn't remember that. I'm really glad you brought that up. Okay, Professor, we've got to see if there's any questions.
We got all these people who need to.
Yeah, we got to see if there's any questions. Let's see if I want to honor somebody. Frank, you did a favor for me by being interviewed by a professor in confidence, and I guess I blew that because millions of people listen to this podcast. Frank, thanks for doing that favor, chatting with that professor. You don't have to talk about that. What is your question for Professor Tootle or comment?
If we imagine that, thank you, Professor Tootle, Stephen. I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with your strong opinion that not a whole lot, that President Trump is not going to be able to execute on many of the things that he talks about because there's just too many checks and balances within our system. And I believe that. John, I think
Frank, you're not going to put Pelosi and Schumer and Liz Cheney in a military tribunal.
No, and they're he's going to deport 1 million people. Next February.
10 million.
10 million, right? Not going to happen.
Million.
Okay. I mean, you can't find.
I don't mean to be interrupting you. Go with your questions or comments.
But that's an old thing that George Will actually probably 25 or 30 years ago pointed out, that there aren't enough buses in the United States. That you would have, even if you confiscated every single bus in the United States, you would not have the transportation capacity to deport all the people who are here illegally. So the idea that somebody's going to do this, you would have to defy the laws of physics in order to do so.
But there won't be
whatever you want to talk about, Frank. Whatever comments or questions, you're up.
Look, I would like for President Trump to be able to implement some meaningful legislation, change Social Security so that we're not escalating the cost of living every year. Just get rid of it. No cost of living increases, and let people retire 2 years later and have a major impact on Social Security, as an example. Is that reasonable to imagine that there might be the discipline in between the executive and legislative?
I don't think so. I mean, I
don't think so.
We can. I would just say, like, part of my thesis on President Trump is, like, you can hope for whatever you want, and it will be entirely unpredictable and based on his very, let's say, unique character flaw, traits, and if you try to predict any of it, you're just going to end up frustrated, because if you try to apply any kind of logic, or of course it would be reasonable, of course, yes, this is going to involve some sort of rational compromise or whatever, but he's never given any indication that he's interested in doing any of those things.
Okay, then the question is, as a classically liberal conservative, how do I influence the most positive outcome of the next 4 years? What do I do?
You talk to everybody else.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, because there are going to be people other than President Trump who are going to be in the room and negotiating. And so whatever influence that you have in your own life, to be crude, I guess I'd say, if you really want to influence public policy, get $1,000, donate it to the nearest Republican congressman, go to one of their dinners and pay to talk to that guy. If you have $1,000, and he will
Because you go
have
to
to listen to you.
the private invite only for the $1,000
Yeah,
donors.
but usually it's less than that. I mean, they hold
It is.
dinners all the time where it's like $50 to go or $100 to go or something like that. I'm saying, like, set aside $1,000, go to 4 of these things, and you will and I don't think people understand that, like, if you set aside $1,000 to donate to a political candidate, you will immediately become you'll be in the top 100 people in that district who they want to keep happy.
It's true.
Because all the corporate money comes in, but they always want people who give them the middle of the maximum, because it makes their numbers look better for support within their district.
And Frank,
for getting the big corporate money and PAC money.
Frank, in the last month, I've talked to 3 congressmen, 2 ex-governors, 10 mayors. I mean, I talk to everybody all the time. You can even do it without the $1,000 as long as you do it, volunteer your time, walk door to door.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, you work as a door knocker, like
with the candidate, and you're across the street from the candidate, and you drive there together, and you have private time, and you have enormous influence with people. They like you, and you'd like them if you were running for office too.
I would just say, like, if you volunteer twice and give 4 times,
yep,
you'll have unlimited access to every office holder within 90 miles of you.
Yeah, Frank, do you not give money politically? I'd be surprised.
Oh, Nikki Haley's my best friend now. She texts me every few days.
Yeah, but where you would have influence, though, I mean, and if you want person to person like, giving money to somebody far away isn't going to get you that kind of access, but
but your own congressman and your own state reps and senators, your own governor.
Yeah. Oh, especially state reps. I mean, forget it. You can that state rep his district director will be taking you out to lunch and writing down everything you say.
It's a fact. I used to do that for a
living. Hey, how's this? This is something I know I'm just talking, but I stopped giving money to the Republican, whatever, what's it called?
I don't know. Always give to candidates. Good job.
Yeah. But I pulled that money back, and I started giving money to, took that same money and gave it to We the People and what's the school that sends out the
Hillsdale?
Hillsdale, yeah. So I split the money between Hillsdale and We the People, thinking, okay, I'm going to educate young people, give money to help educate people in civic awareness.
Well, I would
conservative values, and I think that's a better way to spend the money.
Hillsdale doesn't need your money, so I would say give it to Ashland, the Teaching American History in the Ashbrook Center, and the Bill of Rights Institute and
the Bill of Rights Institute. We're going to have the director on the Bill of Rights Institute. So
the Bill of Rights Institute does amazing work because they actually get curriculum into classrooms.
Well, what about the Center for Civic Education? That's what I've been doing.
It's good, but the other thing is they already have a ton of money. Like I would prefer, because in Hillsdale, it's fine. Give money to Hillsdale if you feel like giving money to Hillsdale, but if you want your money to kind of go further, I would give to, like I said, Bill of Rights Institute, Constituting America, and Ashbrook, and Teaching American History, which is also at Ashland.
So let me
because they're nonpartisan and less identified with being conservative, like they managed to get curriculum in regular classrooms
So,
and
Professor, I
teacher
got to interrupt you.
trainings and stuff like that all over
That's
the
on
country.
substance, and you and Frank can talk about the
Yeah,
details of
sorry.
that
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
But let me add on, Frank, and everybody else who will ever listen to the show. Please don't just send in a check to an organization. The president will never see it. It will just be a check. Call up and ask for the executive director or the president or a board member. I know you can call a bunch of different people. Their political policy director, their white paper researcher guy. Call them up and say that, hey, I was meeting with two conservatives, Stephen Tootle and John Brackney. They met at the American Enterprise Institute, and they suggest I consider your organization, and I'd like to talk to the CEO. The CEO will likely return your call based off those words. You have
Yeah.
Professor Tootle and John, they met at AEI. Frank, when I went to DC a few years ago, I met with David Bose. He was like the guy that ran Cato. He was like one of the most prominent people in conservative. I met with him personally for an hour in his office because I called up and say, I'd like to talk to you about an initiative I'm working on. I met with the Bill of Rights, the CEO of the Bill of Rights Institute. Why? Because I called up and said, I'm going to be in DC, and they met with me because they thought maybe I could be a donor or maybe I was well connected. They weren't sure why they were meeting with him. I told them I needed to meet with me, and they met with me because no one else does this kind of stuff. They don't, no one calls David Bose and says he wants to meet when he's in DC. He thought I was important.
Yeah, you never forget that these people are not famous. They're academic famous, which means that like people if you want to, I'm not hard to reach. Like any of the these people who we talk about in this whatever this is, webcast, podcast, that like these are all people who, if you email them, that email goes directly to them. If you call them in their answer, they say hello.
Frank, about 3 years ago, I asked Professor Tootle for the most prominent 10 or 15 historians across America. He just jotted them down. I wrote them down, and out of the 15, 9 have been Facebook friends for years, and some of them I talked to. Just because he mentioned them on a conversation with me, and I decided to send an invitation, and I sent him a message that said, Professor Tootle says you're a really important person and influential in society, and I should know you. And they go, accept. And so then I read their stuff. It's really interesting. Anyway, we'll help you on that. Thanks, Frank. Thanks.
No,
for
that's
that.
good. No, thank you for letting me ask these.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ada, you like being quiet sometimes and other times you don't. Which would you like to be? Would you like to ask a question, Ada, or should we move to the next person? Another 5 seconds, Ada. Do you want to speak or no?
No, she's saying no.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't see that. Thank you. How about you, Debbie?
No, thank you. I'm just
Okay.
here to listen. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Jake, you're still with us. How come you're not back with your high school students?
Well, John, I told you in the group chat that it's a professional development today,
Okay.
so I don't have to
Let's see
teach.
if we can get you some professional development credit.
Yeah, this counts as your professional development? We're in a sad state in America.
No, we had a 2-hour meeting this morning where we talked about having genuine connections with our students, and that counted for 2 hours of professional development.
Okay, not us. Okay.
I bet Jake, I bet you liked my paragraph about education and filling in boxes.
Yeah, that's every education meeting I've gone to in education.
Check mark it. That's good for the Army as well, by the way. Army's really good at that stuff. Okay, Karen, I know you signed up late and joined us late, but you're one of the most thoughtful people I know. I don't even think you're practicing law anymore. Karen, do you have any questions or comments?
I actually do, because no one ever accuses me of being quiet. My question, many of my moderate and conservative friends have become unaffiliated, and I'm not sure if that's helping our Republican Party. I am a Republican. I've always been a Republican. I don't know if I'll always be a Republican. I'm disappointed with who the Republicans picked because, as the professor says, he's unpredictable. And there might have been better choices, but I didn't know if our professor has a thought about what we can do within the Republican Party, or if we rejoin parties, or is it better to be unaffiliated and try for like ranked choice voting, to do ballot initiatives, things like that, to take the power of the parties away. And I just finished reading that politics, the industry book. I'll have to, I can get you the name, but it's definitely a in favor of ranked choice voting, because the way the current duopoly is set up, the Republicans and Democrats hold power in Congress. And that's part of the stalemate now. We don't know if that'll change with the Republicans having a president and the Senate and maybe the House, but didn't know your thoughts on that.
So, first of all, John and I sort of go back and forth on this. And my answer is sometimes. In my case, one of the things that really still keeps me connected to the Republican Party is that I still have a Republican congressman who I admire more than almost anybody else on earth. And
Valadao got elected again, even though the Democrats.
David Valadao, and buried in the middle of my article is that David Valadao manages to get elected again, and I give money to him. If the Republican Party were all a bunch of David Valadaos, America would be a wonderful country. He is. In many ways, what I consider to be almost an ideal congressman, a person of high character and intelligence who wants to do the right thing. I don't agree with every single thing he does, but just in turn, so that still keeps me connected to the Republican Party, probably in a way that if there wasn't a single, he's not my congressman, though. I should say he's you got to go over a couple miles, so I would say the answer is sometimes. If there's something that keeps you connected, or you want to be able to influence policy right now, you almost have to be connected to one political party or the other. But if you find yourself in a position where it's so morally objectionable to do so, I think it's absolutely perfect and fine and wonderful if you cast down your identity and say, no, I've had enough, no more. It's what we often forget this. This is what created the Republican Party. The Republican Party didn't exist. And what happened between 1850 and 1854, and really almost all of it happened in 1854. Just imagine if this were to happen today. 70% of Americans basically said, I'm so fed up with this that I have no identity as a Whig or as a Democrat. I'm going to go off with other people, reject the entire political tradition of America, and say, or I should say, I'm going to embrace what I think America is about and reject all of these politicians and political labels. But it really is amazing that it happened so quickly in basically a year.
Because of repulsion to slavery.
Yeah, well, the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So much so that people said, I don't even have a name. I'm just anti-Nebraska, So there's a proud tradition of that. It's what created the Republican Party. So I understand being fed up. But I do think that being fed up doesn't mean you disengage.
And if I could add, so it is called The Politics Industry, and Jake Peterson put up the name of the book and the author. What happened in Colorado was, because unaffiliateds are now allowed to vote in primaries out here, many of my moderate friends have left the party. So I am left sitting in a room with the ultra right left managing the party. And I don't know how to attract my moderate friends back into the discussion, because I think we would get more traction in Colorado if we had more moderate voices here. Right now, we have 2 Democratic senators. And other than a few pockets, most of the Congress people have also, on the House side, gone Democratic. So it's a tough place to live when you're a Republican and not an ultra right Republican.
But you know, the crazy thing about local politics is if you can find even 10 friends, you could take over the local central committee. You know,
Well, you could take
there
over.
isn't a central committee in America that couldn't be overtaken by 10 human beings.
Oh, no, you mean like a county central committee?
Yeah,
And
county central committee.
no, you
Those
need
races are never contested. I mean,
need 100, Professor. Maybe.
no, I'm saying if you got 10 people to run for office against the existing central committee and then campaign, you could take over the central committee of the party.
But in order to get those 10, you'd need 500 to get the be enough.
Well, you'd have to get
supporters for those 10.
signatures to get on the ballot, right? You'd have to have valid signatures. But I mean, I'm not sure what every state has different things that qualify you to get on the ballot. But like if you got 10 people to run, because I mean, even here, you wouldn't even need 10 if you had 5. You could completely take over the central committee, because most of the time, I mean, I was an incumbent on central committee. My name only appeared on the ballot once or twice, you know, because most of the time nobody ever registered to run against any of us. So
let me interrupt, Professor. Karen, a nuance of Professor Tootles, and you put this on my wall, and sorry to be discourteous and not answer it yet. I will.
No, you're okay.
Another lesson for people. If you were to call 9 of your moderate friends that used to be Republicans, and you could get 7 of them, you could probably call up the governor, a U.S. senator, any mayor, and say there's 7 moderate independents that would like to talk to you about blank, blank, and blank, and will only take a half an hour of your time, but it's essential because we're each thinking about bringing in 10 friends, and we're going to have 200 people in 2 weeks, but we want to talk to you first. I can almost assure you that everybody in Colorado, including governors and U.S. senators, would be delighted to meet with you. You try to do that in the Republican Party, you're not getting anywhere because there's a district captain and whatever, and you're pro-choice and they're pro-life, and they don't care what you think. You do that as an individual, you can get in almost any meeting you want, and I'll help you, by the way. I'm planning on doing a lot of this myself. So anyway, any other questions or comments for Professor Tootle? Bill, you get to close us out besides his closing comments.
Cool. So what I've been mulling over, John, at the beginning of this program, you mentioned, you know, what will Trump's favorability rating be after 3 years? It kind of begs, I'd like to open up a quick question around what his honeymoon, if you want, that's what we call it, might actually look like. His election was obviously fueled by deep-seated anger amongst lots of people that trumped any consideration of Harris as an alternative. It was just a reaction, much around their economic situation, made worse by inflation that's now baked into the economy, maybe some by culture war issues. Trump can't fix those things. So what's his honeymoon look like? And, you know, what happens? Does that anger dissipate and not come back, or does it go on pause and then reassert itself in 2 years when we have our next congressional elections? What's it look like?
Professor.
if he, you know, it depends on if he passes any of his actual legislation, any of his actual proposals, like his big priorities, like a tariff bill, for instance. If he passes a tariff bill.
Wait, he doesn't need to pass a tariff bill. He can do that unilaterally as the executive.
But or let's say he executes a tariff bill without a corresponding legislative adjustment in tax policy. it's going to create inflation. And if that happens, then his honeymoon is going to be very short. But if it looks like he's not going to actually do that, and instead what you're going to get is deregulation of industries that nobody's heard of or cares about, that nothing's going to make a headline, and no real action. The Fed just cut rates. If something housing prices come down, if you get some sort of fuel prices manage to go down, somehow, he might have or I should say Republicans might have an 18-month honeymoon. But voters have about politics, voters have a goldfish memory. About their wallets, they do not. So this is something that I think frustrated a lot of Democrats, was they would say, oh, inflation has gone down. Yeah, it went down this year. It hasn't gone down over the last 4 years. So don't tell me that the economy's good when I'm poorer than I was 4 years ago. So about their pocketbooks, voters do not have a goldfish memory. But about political issues, they do. They're not going to care. About what Trump does in his first 90 days in office by the time the midterm elections roll around.
So
they'll be voting on something completely different.
Professor, this was on NPR, so you got to take that for what it's worth. But there was a conversation on, they centered around blacks and Hispanics who voted for Trump. That was the whole series of an hour-long show on NPR this week.
Yeah.
And without exception, every one of them said, I'm just sick of the Democratic Party. They haven't given me anything. And I figured that Republicans are going to do something for me. And when I heard that, I went, oh my God, wait till the Republicans are going to do something for you that will directly impact your life. Oh, good luck with that.
Well, but here's what they are going to do. They're going to do they aren't going to execute the unpopular parts. This is the last thing Bill said, like of the social agenda. What they're going to do is they aren't going to be told that they have a racial identity that they don't necessarily have. They don't. I mean, I was just thinking about this, and again, this is another thing I want you to look up, Jake, really fast. Is how many kids are involved in youth sports in America?
Oh God, that has to be 20 million.
Yeah, and if you think about every single person who has a kid, how many of them didn't participate in some sort of youth sports program? Yeah, 60 million, right? Wow. And the person who's creating a good country for America is that dad who's volunteering for that kid's soccer team. And what people want, what Black people want, what Hispanic people want, what all Americans want, is they don't want somebody telling them how to think and telling them that they're wrong for for their own beliefs. And if I get it that there's a vocal minority of people who want us to say Latinx, but most Hispanics don't even like being called Hispanic. I remember when the Pew Hispanic Institute was launched, one of the first surveys that they did revealed that no Hispanic wanted to be identified as Hispanic. They all want to be called whatever by their country of origin. Mexican Americans want to be known as Mexican or Mexican American. They're fine with that. And and by the way, they don't care that much. It was like other people wanted them to have an identity that they didn't have for themselves. And what they got tired of is they got tired of people telling them to have beliefs that they didn't have. So one thing they are going to get from Donald Trump is they're going to get an orange-faced, weird-haired guy who dances strangely, but he's not going to change his accent depending on who he's talking to. And he's going to talk to everybody the same way. It's going to be weird, but it's going to be the same based, and a lot of people don't want a racial identity, and they don't want their kids to have a racial identity, and they don't want their schools to be, they want their kids to learn how to read and learn how to write. They want them to know something about history. They want them to know about math and chemistry and biology. And they want their kids to be able to play sports, and they want their daughters to be able to play sports, and they, I mean, I love the movie The Three Amigos, and there's a line in it where Chevy Chase says, "Do you have anything here besides Mexican food?" And and I remember when I was on my honeymoon, something my ex-wife said, and I was like, in Mexico they just call it food. You know, everybody's like, Americans just want to get on with their lives and not have other people tell them what to do. And if there's a positive message from this last election, and I get that a lot of people are feeling negatively about it, but I think there is an undercurrent in these elections, especially when you find that women, by the way, voted, moving towards young women voting for Trump, that's an interesting trend. But Hispanics, Black people, young people, and what is it? I think it's a rejection of that imposed identity. And I hope that Democrats and media institutions and educational institutions hear that message. I don't know if they will, and I kind of predict that they won't, but I hope that they do.
Yeah, Americans are rugged and ruggedly independent. We're stubborn.
Yeah, well, what they don't like is, and I felt like that was the most effective Trump ad. There was, was he had that ad that said, like, I'm sure Jake can find this one too, but he's for they, them, I'm for you.
Yeah.
That, I think that resonated with a lot of people who were rejecting an imposed identity from elites. A bunch of elites telling other people this is how you should feel because of the color of your skin or because
I have
of
a
your
question.
Yeah, jump in. And
Yeah, go
you're
ahead.
probably going to get the last one, Frank.
So this the results from this election, people didn't like what the economy's doing, and they didn't like being told what they should be thinking. Equally important, or did one, do you think the issue of being told what to think was more important than the dollars?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Because in a close election, everything's important. And this
Yeah.
still was a relatively close election. Let's not act like it was. I mean, it was broad.
In
and
political terms, it's a landslide, but only in political terms.
I don't know. It's a landslide in contemporary terms, but we've had bigger landslides before. But in terms of how broad it was, but I think your question is better answered by focusing on who the gettable voters were. The people who were actually on the fence. And I think for the people who were on the fence, I think those are the two big issues. Because we're sifting through all this data, but if I were to say, like, my first impression, this is probably also has to do with my own prejudices too, so take this with a grain of salt. But I would say the two things that I kept seeing were, stop telling me that I'm not poor, or stop telling me that prices are low. You're telling me that prices are low, and I know that prices are not low. That's you can't. And the Democratic Party was sending a message You're wrong about your reality. and voters are gonna, gettable voters are gonna reject that. You know, like don't tell me that that inflation is low now. I get that you have some fancy definition of inflation, some technical definition of inflation that says that we don't have inflation now. But by my definition of inflation, we have inflation. And stop telling me who I am. Like almost every message that's coming through in the exit polling data kind of from the gettable voters seems to fall into those two buckets. So in a way, yeah, it does come down to like the economy and identity.
Well, let me give you a nuance of that, Professor. I don't disagree, but anecdotally, I'm surprised by a number of my friends who were very angry at news reports and self-observation about putting up illegal immigrants or undocumented aliens, in hotels for 6 months. I mean, we put up like something like 50,000 of them in Denver, and they're struggling in their own apartment or their house that they can barely afford. And they see we're sending billions to Ukraine. So wait, we're helping these people coming across our border and we're sending money to Ukraine. Who's helping me? And they're voted for Trump because they just, enough's enough, help America.
Yeah. But I would say let's also remember that you have to listen to the quiet people, because they're the ones who are the gettable voters. You know, the people who are loud and offer this stuff up, or you know, they're not the ones you need to listen to the people who aren't talking. and you know, I think about like, so, and I never thought about this, but you know, when I was having a conversation with a student and they were like, yeah, both my parents are going to be voting for Trump, and it was, you know, Mexican girl, and it was like, why? So, well, you know, Harris wants to pay for gender reassignment surgery for illegal aliens, and you know, my family's, you know, they had a health, you know, my aunt had cancer or something. Is like, and we tried to, you know, we tried to do it the right way, and we went broke, and we had to, you know, rely on the free stuff. And he says like, this is just wrong. You know, and I never, and that was a sort of personal experience from somebody who didn't shout it from the rafters, you know, not an activist or something, but those are two Mexicans who filled in the blank for Donald Trump. You know, and it was the gender reassignment. And we can sit back and say like, oh, they shouldn't have had that opinion. You know, that's what elites will do, you know, they sort of say they shouldn't have felt that way, or something. You know what? This is a democracy. Like, you don't get to tell those people how they feel about that. You know, you get to have your feelings about it, but they get to have their feelings about it too. And they can feel like that's unfair. And they get to vote on that, and their vote counts just as much as yours does. You know, and that was the margin of victory in this election, I think.
I think we're going to end it at that.
I do want Jake to, let's let Jake come in.
All right. But quickly, Jake.
Okay, I'll be fast. I've got lunch in a couple minutes with my department anyways. So on Tootle's point about the election and kind of like the cognitive dissonance between like Democrat elites and normal people, and Rui Teixeira talked about this in his Liberal Patriot post, which was really good. I have an uncle who is a hardcore Democrat, and so a couple months ago I posted something about inflation on my Insta story, just a meme, and I said, darn Bidenflation, because I have personally experienced a lot of inflation over the last year and it's hurting my family. So then he proceeded to send me this massive email where he said, don't you know that the economy is actually doing better now than it was before COVID? And my jaw just dropped. And I'm like, I don't know what world you live in, but the interest rate on my house is 6.125%. Like, most of my paycheck is going towards my mortgage payment every month. That wouldn't have happened before COVID. So I just,
and that's like,
but again, he's telling me
$500 a month out of your paycheck that, you know, my mortgage, because I refinanced when mortgage rates were low. Like, I paid 2% or something on my mortgage, so, my mortgage payment is $500 or $600 less and than somebody who bought a house in the last few years. And you can't tell somebody, well, you can, and it is true. And we believe the economists when we say, like, yes, it is true. You still have a job, right? The management of the economy through the ups and downs meant that, like, we did manage it. And yes, we can, we can say, compared to other countries, we're doing okay. Compared to other crises, we're doing okay. And unemployment is the most important thing. Those are all true. But the thing about America is that, and it's kind of beautiful and it's kind of sad and it's kind of frustrating, is that people still go to their politicians and say, yeah, but still, I want it to be better. Like, I want my job and I want that lower house payment I had. And you can sit there and go, like, well, that's unreasonable. And they say, yeah, well, that's what I want, though. Like, that's what yeah. And you're going to feel it. And because you're going to say, like, why am I paying $500 or $600 or even $1,000 a month more in mortgage than somebody who just was lucky enough to not buy a house in the last 4 years?
So Tootle, I've got kind of like a closing question for
Yeah.
you that would be a good wrap-up statement. So on election night, I had a former student who now lives in Seattle call me, and he leans liberal, but he's pretty open-minded about stuff. He really likes me, and he knows that I lean conservative. And so he was just asking me, because at this point, it was apparent that Trump was going to win Pennsylvania, and we knew that he was going to win. And so he said, is the apocalypse coming? Because everything I'm seeing in Seattle, all the ads say that if Trump gets reelected, it's the end of life as we know it. And I tried to talk him through it, and I'm like, well, you lived through the first Trump presidency and you're still alive. Okay. And I kept telling him, one of the beautiful things about America is, in a republic, we have elections quite often. And so I'm like, pretty much every election I've lived through, they've said this is the most important election ever. So-and-so gets elected and then nothing happens. And I told him, frankly, if you live a healthy life, you're going to live through 17 more presidential elections. And so I'm like, that's a beautiful thing, that if things start going off the rail, Trump has hit his term limit, and then traditionally America will do a course correction and will vote in someone new. So as a closing statement from you, is a second Trump presidency going to be the end of life as we know it, or is America going to be able to survive?
Professor, let me answer it before you so you get the last word. Jay,
Okay.
I stand by my prediction a week ago that the first Trump presidency put hundreds of people in very awkward professional and personal situations. The White House counsel, the attorney general, the Secretary of State of Georgia. There were some really uncomfortable situations that the president put them in. I think it's likely that instead of hundreds, there's going to be thousands or tens of thousands of Americans that are put in pretty uncomfortable professional and personal situations. Indirectly, maybe millions, but it's not 330 million. It's people that are directly trying to figure out how to execute order. I think I stand by that. I think that's a good prediction. There's going to be people that are really, if you're an illegal alien in America, you should be nervous. You should be really, really nervous. That's 10 million people should be nervous. Now, Professor, you got to correct me or answer your own way.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, again, well, I guess I should listen to myself and say, like, I don't get to tell other people how to feel. If you're an illegal alien and you want to feel nervous, by all means, feel nervous. But my advice to you is that you should be like, I mean, here's the other thing. Like, I know a lot of illegal aliens, and so they are already operating outside of the law. They so the way that they are going to continue to live their lives is not going to change, because they already exist outside of the legal system. So in sort of day-to-day life, there's nothing else that they're going to do that's going to be any different. But no, if it was somebody who was trying to live within the law, or, I don't know. I don't think people should be.
Oh, come on, Professor. Out of all those 3 million, and eliminate the military, or 4 million, 2 million federal civil servants, you don't think a lot of them are nervous about their job
Yeah,
prospects?
yeah, of course I should say, like, of course, like half of America is really nervous. Half of America is really sad right now. Half of America is really scared, and they're all entitled to their feelings. You know, but if you're asking me sort of objectively, should they be? I just find that to be counterproductive. I mean, one of my favorite expressions I picked up when I was in Ohio is "don't borrow trouble." Why would I worry about something that I have no control over and that hasn't happened yet? Like, it's like, I guess I could sit at home and worry about getting cancer, but I'm not going to worry about getting cancer until I get the diagnosis. That's when I'll worry about getting cancer, like.
But can't we both be right on this? I'm saying that you're right on, for 60 million Americans that voted against Trump, or whatever the number was. I agree with you. But for certain subsets of society, a federal bureaucrat or an illegal immigrant or somebody who's been voracious against Trump, I don't know, it seems like it would be rational to be more nervous and over the next few years.
I mean, I never put anything past him, so who knows what kind of like insane documents will come out of his, and statements will come out of his mouth when he, in his first 90 days in office. But even that, because he has so many crazy ideas, he can't implement them all with any sort of focus. And this is getting back to my point about why he will probably, I predict he will remain our third worst president, because he's too incompetent to ever become our worst president or our second worst president. He's not smart enough or competent enough to be our worst president. He would have to be a lot smarter, and he would have to be a better administrator. He would have to be a much more effective leader in order to ever be our worst president or our second worst president. So I don't think he'll ever pass out Pearson Buchanan in my ranking, because he's too incompetent. I mean, that's not a compliment, but it's. Right. I mean, something that Jonah Goldberg, I'm sure Jake's heard him say this a million times, where he says, like, he's not Hitler. Hitler could have repealed Obamacare. He didn't do anything in his first term in office. He was too incompetent. And maybe he's going to surround himself with people who are more loyal and slightly more competent this time around. But here's a sad lesson for you in Tolerance and Murder. We sometimes give Western civilization all this sort of credit for being, good, but really, essentially, what happened in Europe was that Protestants and Catholics tried to murder each other, and there were just too many of them. And eventually, they learned that that Protestants and Catholics would have to stop murdering each other, because there were just too many. It was too evenly balanced. Yes, Donald Trump is going to win this election by what, 6-8 million votes, something like that, in a nation of 350 million people. Like, you can't oppress half of Americans. There are too many people on the other side. I mean, I think about, like, something I teach, the fugitive slave law. It's going to seem like crazy. Think about this thing that is an affront to the Constitution and politically motivated. How many times was it actually implemented in the 10-year period between 1850 and 1860?
And this is forcing U.S. citizens to help turn in slaves, right?
Like 315-ish times, right? Yeah, or Jake, yeah, 300, right? 300-ish times over 10 years. And every one of them was a lawsuit. You know, every one of them was famous. Every one of them got fought by the people of the United States. You don't think that in the United States in the year 2024, Japanese internment during a war, the instant it started, Americans were standing up and saying, let's make sure they have legal representation. Let's get these cases into court. I mean, we look at these things as oppressions right now, but what you should really focus on, the strength of America is that in every one of these cases, the evil was limited by the system. That's the greatness of America. that nobody gets to execute their evil, and that Americans stand up and say, like, no, this is wrong, and I've now reached my limit. As your friend who asked the question earlier, like, when do I sort of cast down my identity? Well, Americans do this all the time. They hit their limit and they say, no, this is my line, you just crossed it. And when Trump crosses that line, I mean, you remember something that Jeff Bloodworth, Professor Bloodworth, said. It's like, don't bet against America. If and when Trump crosses that line, don't bet against America. Like, Americans will say, there's the line, you just crossed it.
Lovely. Jake, I assume that's good for you. Everyone else, I assume you've gotten your fill of questions and comments? If so, Professor, I want to end with that, unless you have one more thing that we should have covered. Any general big picture item in the election for us to consider what we as citizens should be doing in the next year?
Well, I guess I just remind people, like, I really think that that Roy Teixeira article that Jake put in the notes deserves to be read and taken seriously. I think it was maybe, if I was a liberal, I would read that article and take it very seriously. I think that I just want to hit that one more time.
Excellent. Professor, appreciate your time today. I know we went way over. Thank you, and we'll see you next week and beyond.
Yep, good to see you. Take care.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you join us again.
Yeah. Frank and Bill especially, it's good to see you.